Meeting of the Legislative and Legal Affairs Committee at 6:32. Good evening, folks. We have two orders we're going to take up tonight. They're interrelated, so I'm going to read off both orders, and then we can kind of dispense with that part of the program. The first order is, order number 13-1005600, that the Marlborough City Council hereby accepts Mass General Law, Chapter 64L, Section 2, local option meals tax excise, which imposes a local sales tax upon the sale of restaurant meals originating within the city of Marlborough by a vendor at a rate of 0.75% of the gross receipts of the vendor from the sale of restaurant meals. No excise shall be imposed if the sale is exempt under Section 6 of Chapter 64H. The vendor shall pay the local sales tax imposed under the section to the Commissioner at the same time, in the same manner as the sales tax due to the Commonwealth, being is herewith referred to the Legislative and Legal Affairs Committee. That's the first order. The second is order number 13-1005601, that the City of Marlborough establish in the City Treasury a special revenue account to be known as the Parks and Fields Development Special Revenue Fund in the City of Marlborough, into which account shall be deposited A, certain receipts comprising a portion of the total restaurant meals tax received annually by the city, and B, any grants and monetary gifts or donations made to the city in furtherance of the purposes of this act. The purposes of this act and of the Parks and Fields Development Special Revenue Fund shall be to promote and to sustain the development of sports tourism through the development of parks and fields in the City of Marlborough and the local economy in the City of Marlborough. It is further ordered that the city solicitor be requested to draft an act establishing a Parks and Fields Development Special Revenue Fund in the City of Marlborough for adoption by the City Council, approval by the Mayor, and petition to the Massachusetts Massachusetts Legislature. So those are two orders we have before us. Unless anybody has some opening comments or concerns they want to issue, I was going to ask Mr. Cummings to come forward and just make a short presentation. Councilor Delano.
If I can make just a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Pope and I proposed this, and to be very brief, what we want to do is upgrade our athletic fields here in the city. We have not one single artificial surface owned by the people of Marlborough, and we need that. The communities around us have it. It gives them an advantage athletically. It puts us at a disadvantage because we can only use most of these fields during the day. We can't use them when they're in poor condition. And I think in this day and age, we want to have as many people, both youth, children, and adults in Marlborough, getting as much exercise as we possibly can. We want to have those fields available for our sports teams as well. And we have been unable to do it for years and years and years. And I know many of us have talked about it, and this is finally a way to do it. Yes, it's a tax, but it's not a tax that expands government. This is a tax that goes directly to the people, and it's not a tax that's paid for, once again, by homeowners and property owners. It's paid for by everyone, many of whom are visitors to our city. So that's the goal, at least that I have.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to piggyback on what Councilor Delano said, the reason that we filed this at this time of year was because as we were looking at the upgrades to Ward Park, and we realized the significant cost there, and the fact that with doing one park, we are not going to be able to do another park in this city for quite some time. I have been talking with the Youth Sports Partnership and a few people around town, and it's really kind of tying their hands, not being able to have tournaments, putting these fields to good use. It hurts our high school because when the weather is bad and the fields get significantly wet, they can't practice. So there's really nothing, it is a tax, I do understand that, but of all the taxes that we pay, this is the one that you're probably going to feel the least, and this is the one that you have a choice in. If you don't want to pay this tax, you don't have to go out to eat. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Mr. Cummings?
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. For the record, Tim Cummings, Executive Director of Marlborough Economic Development. Before we get started, I just wanted to
That's to everyone at home. Ouch.
give some initial background onto why we're here today. Marlborough Economic Development, has a mission to improve the quality of life here in the city through discussions internally with the Board of Directors at Marlborough Economic Development over the course of the summer, and then in through the fall. There was this discussion about improving the assets in the city by this unique revenue source. From there, we had a conversation at the Executive Committee with a recommendation to advance this proposal tonight to you for your consideration. I just passed around a little background information on how we came here tonight to give you a brief history. With that being said, I know most of you have seen the proposal, and it's been sent to you via email earlier in the week. But for the viewers at home, I thought I would just go through a quick presentation to explain why we're here today. So with that being said, we're talking about Chapter 70, Section 60, and 156 of the Mass General Laws. And essentially, we're looking to adopt a local option meals tax. The purpose will be exclusively for the enhancement of the parks, fields, and sports recreational facilities here in the city. The point of this presentation tonight is just to give you the facts, nothing more, nothing less, by using both quantitative and qualitative information that I was able to gather throughout the last couple weeks. This was enacted in 2009. It's essentially it's a 0.75% increase on your local option meals and alcohol. That's less than 1 penny. It's approximately 3/4 of a penny. It goes straight back into the community. How you do this, you adopt it at the local city council, the state collects the revenue and then disperses it to the city or town. The revenue to the state, to the community starts at the end of the first fiscal quarter following adoption. If this is adopted, it would be treated in a similar manner as the Economic Development Business Development Fund that the city previously imposed on the local option meal rooms. How much are we talking about? In FY11, the Department of Revenue estimated that there was $753,000, and fiscal year 12, $757,000 that could have been collected by the city of Marlborough if you had taken advantage of the local option meals tax. So if we broke that down by meal, we're talking at $20, 15 cents, $50.37, $100.75. If you look at the tips, you're talking about a 3% tip, a $7.50, $50, and $15 on a $100 meal. Essentially, if you look at some of the usual items that you purchase throughout the day, we're talking something about 2 cents per item or less. But before we go any further, I know most of you have seen this proposal, so you probably have this information, but I thought it would be an interesting point that if you hadn't had the previous pages in this slides, would you actually be able to identify any of the communities that have already adopted this legislation? And of course, you always get is this going to be a burden for businesses? According to Professor Edward Glaser of the Harvard Institute, Harvard University he's an economist, he said that additional 0.75% is unlikely to affect decisions about where and when people go out to eat. It's a tiny tax, and tiny tax increases are likely to have tiny impacts on behavior. Again, this is Professor Edward Glaser. He's the director of the Rappaport Institute at Harvard University. Think about it now. Essentially, when you make your decision for going out to eat, you make the decision based on 2 criteria: type of style of food you want and the price point you want to pay. That's your behavior in terms of motivating you to go out to eat, if you choose to go out to eat. Have you figured out which communities have adopted it yet? So here are some testimonials, some qualitative information that gives you some ideas about what other people have said about adopting this meals tax since 2009. John Sullivan, owner of the Jockey Club in Rainham, has said it has not slowed down his business. Joe Gaffey, owner of the Village Manor in Dedham, said the comments have been few. Nobody is happy about a tax increase, but I haven't heard too many complaints. Another restaurant owner in Beverly made comments saying that he understood that this needed to be done and he was supportive of it. All those quotes are from the Boston Globe. You have another owner from the Cape. He said that He was skeptical about Yarmouth introducing the local option meals on restaurants, but he has had a change of heart. It hasn't impacted his business, and this was from the Cape Cod Times. Well, if we do this, will this hurt your community or impede growth? Well, let's see what the data says. According to the sample market that I was able to solicit, it essentially tells you that when you study Sudbury, Wayland, Natick, Maynard, West Boylston, Shrewsbury, Hudson, Westboro, Framingham, and Northborough, there's been actually no detrimental impact to the market. And in fact, you've seen an increase of 4 establishments into the marketplace since these local option meals tax has been adopted in 2009. I broke it down for you by common vicular and then total liquor licenses. And then I itemized it on the further right-hand side to show you either the increase or decrease in the marketplace. And when you add that all up in the aggregate, you have an increase of 4 establishments in the marketplace that I sampled to demonstrate that approving this type of local option meals tax would not hurt your marketplace. But if Marlborough adopts this local option, will people eat in neighboring communities? It's very simple. Would you pay more in gasoline and drive to another town to avoid paying 75 cents on a $100 meal? But if you were, where would you go? 174 communities have adopted this revenue source since September 2013. Here's a quick map that shows you all the communities that have adopted it since September 2013. Here's the eastern seaboard, that essentially from Worcester to the east, showing you the communities that have adopted it. Essentially, all the communities that have restaurants have taken advantage of this opportunity. But let's get a lot more local. So here's a showing you of your marketplace, and the communities that have adopted it are in green. City of Marlborough is in the middle. You'll notice that there are some communities along the broader border that have not adopted the local option meals tax. That's for a couple of reasons. First, Stowe, Boylston, Berlin, and Southborough, they have not adopted it, but as you can see, it's very little revenue for them. They have very little restaurants in their communities. It's not enough to make them want to take advantage of it, especially when you see how many local overrides, operational overrides that they've all approved. So essentially, they're able to pay for their local services without having to take advantage of this revenue source. In other words, the meals revenue offers very little revenue to Southborough, Boylston, Stowe, and they don't really need it. So in the aggregate, let's just take a look at what these communities have adopted. So in Framingham, it's 1.3 million. In Westboro, it's a little less than 600,000. Hudson, 300,000. Sudbury, 200,000. Northborough, 200,000. Natick, 850,000. Maynard, 115,000. West Boylston, 136,000. Shrewsbury, 354,000.
Tim, can I just stop you there? I'm just curious. Do you know the other communities, is this just basically money going back to the general fund?
I would have to tell you, well, I can answer that in a couple ways. I can tell you that no other community is doing what Marlborough is looking to do in terms of creating a special revenue fund. However, most of these communities have, and I passed out an article from the Massachusetts Municipal Association, they have all created policy positions, which basically says they're earmarking the money to be used in certain ways, but it all gets put into the general fund. It's a collection of local receipts and so it's in the local receipts line item.
Thank you.
So essentially, if you look at what Marlborough could collect, you could collect $757,000 as compared to the rest of the communities that have adopted it. You can see on the left-hand side, Framingham and Natick collecting the most. This is just a unique strategy that I wanted to suggest to this group, and that's this could be a creative buy local campaign. And what I mean by that is essentially you can directly support the youth facilities here in Marlborough, the fields, the parks, the youth sports facilities, essentially a dollar for dollar give back, because the money that you're contributing goes straight back to your community. It's an eat, drink, buy local campaign if the community wanted to proceed in this way. Another important fact, the state has given us this tool to help ourselves, and at times they have reduced local aid payments. It is unlikely the state will seriously consider restoration of local aid levels if cities and towns don't take advantage of the tools that are given to them. That's a long-term strategy I just want to make sure you're aware of. So even though the state wants us to pass this local option, our neighbors have passed it. It won't hurt local businesses. It will provide Marlborough with dedicated revenue, and it's an extremely small amount. Why should we impose this initiative? Especially when we learn that it's not really going to affect Marlborough residents. Consider for a moment where you work and eat now. You probably already pay this. The reality is it's a transfer tax on visitors and not on Marlborough residents. you have to, and also you have to partake in it. It's a choice of whether you want to go out to eat. So just quickly looking, if you want to take a look at the average revenue of our 9 neighbors, it's $430,000 in fiscal year 2012. Marlborough's revenue is $757 in fiscal 2012. You can see visually that what we would do on average better than our marketplace if you were to take advantage of this revenue source. We have a potential of generating 43% more. So why are we so different? Marlborough has some economic engines that no other community can compare to. We have the Solomon Pond Mall, Boston Scientific, New England Sports Center, Raytheon, in the entire Southwest Quadrant area. Other communities adopted this revenue, and they have nowhere near the ability to transfer as Marlborough does, but they still did, and they did it for less money. The local option revenue is for liquor and food sales. Where are those located? You can see a map just outlining that it's along your major throughways. Route 20 and Route 85 are the major corridors which have the most volume of traffic. Consider the volume of the mall alone. The reality is when you're eating at the food court, those aren't all Marlborough residents. The vast majority of these patrons are not from Marlborough. Summary, people choose to eat out. Marlborough is surrounded by communities that have already adopted this tax. But most importantly, we have an opportunity to improve your assets, to improve your fields, your recreational facilities, and the youth sports complexes. So here's just a simple fact. You have 1,600 hotel rooms. It's the second largest concentration it's the largest concentration outside of Boston. You're able to get to every single community within an hour. This is all facts that you already know. The reality is Marlborough imports a lot of these people into its community. You're able to transfer this for your benefit. I just handed out a few moments ago an article from the Mass Municipal Association which articulates what the sales tax is on other meals in other states. Essentially Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut. Only Connecticut would have a lower sales tax percentage than the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the city of Marlborough if you were to take advantage of this. So you'd be market competitive as well. Again, this is a transfer tax. So do we really want to turn away a legitimate source of revenue paid primarily by outsiders when we can use it to increase our community assets? The reality is you can maintain your status quo or you can tax yourself through your property taxes, but this is how, from a private business perspective, you increase your wealth. You do it by investing in your assets, and you have an opportunity to do that if you adopt this revenue meals tax. This is important to the community. This is an opportunity to use this brand new revenue for the benefit of Marlborough residents, particularly the children of Marlborough. We can use this new revenue for parks, playgrounds, and sports facilities. And I'll just simply close with a comment that was in the Sun Chronicle, May 2011. Joe McGuire, the chief financial officer for a chain of 14 restaurants in Massachusetts, said passage of the meals tax in other communities had zero impact on his company's bottom line and is a negligible effect on hiring. And that's my presentation this evening.
Would you mind just talking very briefly about the letters of support that have been provided?
Absolutely. In your packet, you'll see a couple items. One, the presentation for you this evening, a template of a home rule petition that you could use as an example as you move forward with this initiative, if you so choose. And then lastly, you have letters of support from the local restaurants here in Marlborough expressing their support in this initiative, as well as the hotels in this community, the Marriott, the Best Western, and the Embassy Suites.
Thank you. Mr. Tominick, do you have anything to offer?
One of the things that we know, a couple things on this, and this is more for the community, the opportunity to be able to have this discussion lies solely in this body's ability to be so fiscally responsible over the past 10 years or since 2009.
Turn on your microphone so the green dot's on.
What I was trying to say was the opportunity to even have this discussion in the way that it's being formed today speaks volumes to the city council and the administration in Marlborough. You know, between from 2008 to 2013, as Tim alluded, 183 communities have absorbed this tax. The city of Marlborough 5 years ago said, you know what, this is not something we need to do. We have a fiscally sound operation, and you all have done an incredible job managing that, and said we don't need that at the time. A couple years back, 3 years ago, you said, you know, we have a problem in economic development and we have an opportunity. And here we are 5 years later, and we still have an opportunity, but we still have a gap. And we have an opportunity to do something uniquely different. And the opportunity to do that lies solely in this chamber's ability to manage the monies in the past. And I just think that that's something that we ought to all talk about first. Second of all, Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, which Tim Cummings is the executive director of, has an opportunity, or has a couple sides of that. There's the economic development side, which focuses directly to retention and expansion of the business community in Marlborough. We also have a side of that which is hospitality and tourism. Hospitality and tourism obviously is where the Economic Development Fund started for the city. We took that local option. It's a huge part of our business. We know that the industry is one of the largest in the states outside of the Boston, Cambridge area as far as the number of hotel rooms. But as we continue to go with that, and part of that charge of the Marlborough Economic Development Corporation is to work with the Hospitality Association, and part of the charge of the Hospitality Association is to work with Marlborough Youth Sports. We know the significant impact that the New England Sports Center has on the hospitality industry, and also the monies that it generates to the local economy. We know that Cal Ripken Baseball has huge impact there. We know that 4-Kick Soccer has significant impact. We also know that youth athletics represent about 50% of the weekend occupancy in Marlborough. And I just give you that information more for a reason why Marlborough Economic Development Corporation is talking about this. It's because we do have an arm of hospitality, which is a huge part of the industry, is sports tourism. What we also know is that the hotels generate nearly 375,000 occupied rooms a year, 750,000 guests a year. Those guests eat 3 meals a day. If you took those 3 meals a day, you're kind of going to come to an approximate restaurant industry number of about $35 million, somewhere in that area of people that are eating in Marlborough that are from outside the city. It's an interesting thing. And then when you break down some of the revenues, you know, it appears that 50 to 60% of the revenues in the city are chain restaurants. And we talk about chain restaurants from McDonald's to Dunkin' Donuts and to the facilities like that. And then you have the likes of the hotel industry, which is a significant revenue stream within food and beverage. The local restaurants from Kennedy's to the Wildwood to the fish and things, and there's a big number there. I think it's interesting when you really break it down and you charge yourself with, you know, drilling into this to talk about it's a tax, and at the end of the day, it's 0.75% of 1%. Not a big number, but it's still a number, and it's interesting to talk about it and break it down. But you can break that number down a few different ways and come to a realization that 75% of that number comes from people from outside the city, whether they're from Framingham coming to the Wildwood eating in the restaurants, or whether that's people from Marlborough eating in restaurants in Framingham. I mean, there's a transfer. If you're from Marlborough and you're eating in Framingham, you're paying 7%. If you're going to the rail trail in Hudson, you're paying the 7%. Meals tax if you're going to the Marlborough restaurants. So it's a difference. To Tim's point, a buy local campaign, a huge opportunity in the city to really kind of embrace the whole opportunity as a community. One of the things that happened through this tourism initiative that we've done through MEDC is we've really spent a lot of time, I think for the first time, really talking with the Marlborough Youth Sports Organization on what their needs are. And Jeff Rosinski from the Marlborough Schools and Chuck from the Parks and Rec Department and Adam Matthews from the Youth Soccer are here to talk about it as well. The needs of the city competitively are significant, and it's really surprising when you start to talk about that and drill into it. So those are some of the facts we know about to talk about it. Questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Questions, councils?
Just to be clear, you didn't really have to go out and twist any arms when you talked to the restaurateurs, you and Bobby Kays. I mean, they got it, right?
Well, you know, when you're talking about that, and you were talking about the sports tourism part of our business, and you're talking about tournaments within the city, whether they be tourism-related or just day events that happen in the city, I think the restaurant industry, as well as the hotel industry, recognizes the opportunity. The more people traveling in Marlborough passively and with activities, there's an opportunity for additional incremental revenues within the restaurants. More people traveling through the restaurants. So when you have a conversation with the restaurants and talk about sports tourism and what the New England Sports Center does, and they go, and we're going to try to do some additional tourism and sports tourism related things, it's a pretty easy conversation to have, because we certainly know the impact of youth sports tourism in Marlborough to date. So to your hands, Council, no, not really a hard conversation, but really a kind of a fun one to have as well.
Right, so we're going to help employment, all the restaurants, from the managers to hostesses, waiters, waitresses, busboys, dishwashers, to hotel rooms, and all the people that supports, and the money flowing back into the city. You know, we get our percentage on all of those hotel rooms, which is a lot of dough. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars coming into the people of Marlborough. So the
Interesting point.
taxpayers are bringing in money as well, and the property owners aren't having to pay it out. So
Well, you
it's
know,
kind of a multiplied effect.
also thinking about that industry and who they employ. You know, those industries employ, in a lot of cases, our youth. You know, at the Embassy Suites Hotel, we probably have 10 or 15 Marlborough kids that work in the hotel to support the industry. You know, whether you're at the Bolton Street Tavern or other restaurants. There's a lot of youth within the community that are working in the restaurant industry in all different capacities. And you think about that and the jobs and the opportunities, as that industry grows and expands, then there's more opportunity for some additional jobs.
Wonderful.
Council Pope.
I just wanted to follow up that, you know, we're at a point in time, when we did Marlborough 2010, which is now Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, there was a lot of trepidation and questions because nobody had ever done anything like that before. I can tell you initially my vote was no on that. I think for the first 2 years, I think when they came in for funding, I voted no. That was the brainchild of former Mayor Hogan and current Mayor Vigent. And they kind of led us along the path and showed us that this is a safe way, through the stewardship of the folks in the hotel that came forward and said, we don't mind if you add this tax to our bill because it's not going to hurt our business. And they've proved to us now, all these years later, that it hasn't hurt their business, and we've been able to move forward as a community because we've been able to fund Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, which has been a huge asset to our city. So now it's a very exciting time for us because we have the ability to not only help our residents through economic development, but help our residents personally through the youth sports program and with the upgrade of our fields. And it's not just the kids that are going to benefit from this. It's adult leagues. There's a lot of folks that are going to benefit from this. We've been a forethinker through economic development. We did the overlay district out on the southwest quadrant that brought us a lot of notoriety in the state. This morning, we broke ground on a new senior center, and this evening, we're talking about helping youth sports. We are truly moving forward and in the right direction. It's a very exciting time for us, and to have the restaurants come forward and tell us that we don't think it's going to impact our business, and to see the communities around us that have already passed this bill and it hasn't impacted their business, we're lucky. We have the tools in place that allow us to earmark this for something, and we know we can do it because we've been successful with Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, and we know we can be successful again.
Thank you. Council Landis.
Mr. Chairman, just to add to that, I'm pretty proud of the fact that, as Council Pope mentioned, it kind of lets the world out there know that we're in pretty good shape financially. You know, just look at our free cash and things like that. The fact that we can take this money and earmark it for programs such as Fields that help all ages, but particularly the kids. One of the restaurants I talked to the other night, he said, Mike, what do you think? Well, you know, Don, it's for the kids. Let's go for it. You know, and that's the attitude, I think, in town. Just a few other comments. I think Councilor Pope also mentioned the corporations that are coming here, you know, and we've talked to them about real walking paths and trails and stuff like that. I'm not so sure if some of them would like to get involved with the softball leagues, maybe the soccer leagues, you know, and that type of activity. I know last spring I stopped at the tennis courts at the high school. He knows what's coming. And I was a person actually from Bolton down there, and he did a little critique of our tennis courts. But I think when we're talking fields and everything, I think we're talking other athletic areas such as tennis courts, and maybe we could expand upon that. So I think being involved in the city long enough that, you know, we've tried to do things over the years. Took us a long time to get the high school field straightened out after we built it in the late 70s. But, you know, the school department, even the city, they only have so much money. I think this gives us an opportunity, all right, to look at, have a committee, group of people together, have a look at the whole situation in the city, come up with a price tag, prioritize them, and then stop right in that I'd like to see something like this be done in, you know, less than a year, no more than 18 months. And I think the way I understand it, that we would bond the cost, and we would pay for the bonds with the revenue coming in on the extra meals tax. So I could go on forever, Mr. Chairman, but I just think that this is great. Great for the city, great for the kids, great for all ages, great for the school department, all athletic teams. And we got a lot of great activities going on in this city.
Thank you, Councilor. Just so folks understand, what we're talking about, basically these two orders, one of the orders in essence accepting the terms and conditions under Mass General Law to impose a tax. The second piece of this is relative to setting up the account and the language. By virtue of that, would basically go through the process of a home rule petition through the legislature. So issues around how we pay for these, whether it's bonding up front or pay as you go, any of those things are kind of outside the specific criteria what we're talking about, but it's a good point, Councilor. Councilor Alba? Oh,
I don't know
sorry.
if I'll yield to the committee member first.
Councilor Rowe.
I guess I may be sitting at this table and in this room, I'm one of the rare ones who have concerns about this. I guess the first one is everybody seemingly jumping for joy of raising taxes, and whether you can say it's not a tax on Marlborough residents, it's only a tax on the general public, it seems a little unfair to everybody. I found an article from 2009 when the Senate first approved the sales tax, when I think everybody was very, very opposed to the increase from 5% to 6.25, and it made this Massachusetts the 7th highest state in the country for taxes on meals. And getting us to 7, I think maybe jumps us up another number. So it's that part of it is still one that I am having the most difficulty with. But the second part is the second piece of this is the need to have a special revenue account. And I haven't confirmed it, but my understanding from everything I could find is that in the communities that have passed this, the money goes into the general revenue, and then as they need it, they budget it or they make a transfer for it out. I've had the same conversation with a couple of people that I believe many of you have had, and I was told that what we would do is bond so that we could do 4 or 5 fields, and then we would pay the bonds off with this. Why do we need to create a special account when if it goes into the general account, we can deal with it then? So I'm not sure why we're creating something that says Park and Fields Development Special Revenue Fund, that the money then has to be voted by the council to be removed from the fund. There's no guarantee that by the time we have enough money to pay for a field, that the council or the mayor would ever agree to bring down a transfer, or that we would say we're going to spend it on turf fields instead of a new playground or a swimming pool or something else. I mean, we're sitting here because we've been told we need fields, but we don't have to just spend it on turf fields because it's a very vague definition. So I have concerns about the second piece of this, along with the increase in the money. And I did talk to Diane Smith today, and her understanding of the language regarding the B part of this, the grants and monetary gifts, she doesn't think that we can do that. Grants have to be kept separate, so I think we need to talk to legal about whether that part of it is actually doable or not, just as a point of information. And I guess regarding the whole, the state raised the tax from 5 to 6.25 with the intent that they needed to raise money to give back to the communities. I found an article that indicated from 2008, which was the year before they raised the tax, to 2013, that communities have had a 38% reduction in their state aid. Don't threaten me with having to do this to get more state aid, because we're not going to get more state aid from the state. They don't have the money to give it to us. They put that in there because they were saying, we're not going to raise it, but we know you need it, so it's going to be up to you to raise it. And Marlborough doesn't need it. We've got enough money that we can bond this without having to raise the rate. So, get off.
Okay, that's okay. Council Pope?
I just wanted to respond to a couple of things that Councilor Roby said. First of all, Councilor Roby, I understand your hesitation with this because that's exactly where I was with 2010. And that is the reason that we set up the whole room petition, because that is the purpose. You get 11 people in a room and make a vote, and then if we are putting this for economic development like we did with the 2010 money, then that is what the councilors are going to vote for. The mayor can send down any kind of transfer that he wants, but he would need 8 votes from that council floor to move that forward. That's the safety net in it. The fact that we're setting up a special fund is because we were successful with Marlborough Economic Development Corporation. And this is a way for us, we know that when we're looking at budgets, yeah, we've had a couple of good years because we've had a lot of business coming in. But in years past, when we've looked at budgets, the first thing that gets cut away is Park and Rec, because it's not really the services that actually you need in the community, and everybody always feels that somebody else is going to make it up. You know, this is our time, I understand, and I also never would have even had the conversation on Marlborough Economic Development Corporation or 2010 had the hotel owners not come in and said, we're fine with this. And again, this is the reason why I'm having this conversation tonight, because we do have the restaurant owners coming in saying, I'm fine with this. We do have our residents being able to make a choice, and we do have many, many people in this community that don't work in this community that are paying it in the communities that they work in every single day. So it is an opportunity for us. I didn't, and I also, I think that Mr. Cummings was just kind of giving us some facts from the state. I don't think he in any way meant to threaten us. We certainly understand what's happening with state revenue. And at any time, the state could come around and say, you know what, for all you people that haven't imposed this tax, you have to do it now and it has to go to X. They have that ability too. So, I mean, there's a lot of things in play right now. Thank you.
Councilor Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everybody knows where I stand on taxes, so I'm going to save you the 2-minute, speech about all that. But I do have a couple points about some things, and then some sort of planning questions about what the next step is. I do agree with Councilor Roby. On one hand, we're saying it's not a huge tax increase, but it's $750,000. So I get it. I'm not going to sit there and say, oh, well, I'm not going to go out to eat tonight because of 0.7%, whatever it is. So I do understand, but we're saying, oh, it's not a lot, but it's $750,000. And the whole, not a lot of people from Marlborough. I mean, when we approved the hotels tax, it was because it's not Marlborough residents. Now we're looking at this, and the argument is, well, it's not a lot of Marlborough residents. I mean, I don't know where the line is. I understand that every single person in every restaurant is not a Marlborough resident, but to say that's not a majority of Marlborough residents, you'd be hard-pressed to get me to believe that. So I do have a couple of sort of planning, next step, and I'm concerned that maybe we're putting we're going out of order here. When we approved this for MEDC, I think we had a pretty definitive idea as to what the next step was. We all knew what the fund was going for. We all had an understanding about what that money was to be spent for. And now with this, I'm looking at it, what is the next step? Is it one turf field? Is it a complex somewhere? where's that turf field going? Because I know certain councilors are going to love a turf field in their ward, some are going to hate it, and there's going to be this big back and forth. So I'm concerned about, my first question is, if we're looking to institute this now, build a turf field next year, where is it going to be? I know people are going to say the middle school back. Well, does the ward councilor want the middle school back? What about the high school? Does the ward councilor want the high school? Galone, do they want it at Galone? Does councilor want it at Galone? So I'm concerned that, if we create this and then we have Councilor A screaming for it, Councilor B screaming against it, and what are we going to do? Are we going to bond it? What happens if we approve this and then councilors like this idea but don't like the idea of bonding it? Then what do we do? So I feel like, I agree with President Pope. If this was the time to do this, I think it's a little bit rushed, but I do agree when we were talking about fields at the last meeting, this was a time to really get the ball rolling, and I do understand that. But I'm just concerned that we're going to approve this tax and then try to figure out, well, what are we going to do next? Where's this first turf field going to go? Do we know the answer to that? Are we going to bond it? Do we know the answer to that? And I know everyone has a different preference about how it's like to be treated, and that's why I think the MEDC fund, the hotels fund, a little bit different, because we knew that was going to go to this fund, it was going to create MEDC, and then we were going to go from there. But with this, it feels like we're going to create the tax and then sort of figure out what the next step will be. And maybe President Pope or Councilor Delano, the sponsor of this, can give me some more information about what the next step is going to be. I've heard rumblings about, like Councilor Lannis just said, about bonding it. Is that what we're going to do? I don't know. So I want to make sure that we know not only are we looking to create this tax, but we know what the next step is going to be, and that councilors know what it's going to be. So we're not just voting to approve the tax, that we're also voting to approve a plan, a long-term plan. And the next step to that would be, if it's $750,000 a year, once all the fields are done, once everything's done, where's that money going to go? And I understand, we could get rid of the tax. As someone who's done government for, some time, I know once you create a tax, you never get rid of it. So say we bond it for 10 years, what's going to happen on year 11? Where's that $750,000 going to go? So I just have some, aside from my views on taxes, I have some planning concerns, and I want to make sure that, and somebody else can fill me in if they have more details about the plan, but that's where I stand, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Delano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to answer some of the questions, first as to whether out-of-town residents are going to pay for some of these fields, if it's 60%, if it's half, if any of us this morning got up and found out that residents from outside of Marlborough are going to pay for half of our senior center, we would have said, where do I sign up for that deal? So this is another situation we're going to spend $5, $6 or more $1 million. And if we can get people outside of Marlborough taxpayers to pay for that, I'm all over that. I don't represent Framingham, Southborough, any of these communities. I don't care about Boston. I care about Marlborough, our residents, our youth, our adults who need the exercise and the ability to play, the corporations that come here and want to be able to play. So to the extent that they're going to pay for part of it, sign me up all day long, because for us to be able to buy these fields at half price to the Marlborough residents, it's a great deal. As to how and where we're going to put them, we're expecting a report hopefully in the next couple weeks. I'm not sure how long from Camp Dresser McKee, and I don't know if anybody can comment on that later. But MEDC is going to pay for a study to be done to give us the specifics on the costs, maintenance, etc. So we're going to have those details. This is our first meeting to try and get the questions out, as you said before, Mr. Chairman. And so we will have that information. As for where the fields will go, the discussions that I've had from day one were about trying to achieve critical mass right away. If we wait and my family as a kid, we saved up, we bought something. You saved up, you bought something. We're not kids anymore. We're in a situation where if we can have a steady revenue stream, we can bond that. And we can capitalize that by getting 3, maybe 4 fields. I'm not sure the exact numbers that will work out in the numbers. That would be, in my mind, the way to go. That's how it was explained to me, and I love that idea, because that really, once we have the critical mass, we can draw in the tournaments. In the summertime, I would imagine, is when most of them will be, when the leagues aren't using them as much, fill those hotels, do those types of things. And right away, that's bringing in revenue from an early stage, and everybody in Marlborough gets to use those fields as well while that's happening. I'm led to believe that we can get a big discount, or at least some discount, if we buy multiple fields within a short period of time. We can't put them all in at the same time because we still have to be able to use fields. But if we can do that and get a discount, it's something we seriously want to consider. So we have out-of-town residents paying for half, get another discount on top. Yes, we will have some carrying costs, but I think that that would work out pretty well. As to where the fields should be, we should have the people involved making the decisions, the people running the youth leagues, Jeff over at the AD over at the high school, and our park rec folks together deciding those things. And I guess we would have the yay or nay, but I don't know that we want to get too close to it. We'll all have some of our ideas, but I think having the people using the fields that know best every day, what are their needs, how do we schedule these things, let them take the lead role. That would be my question. And also the fact that once you start a tax, and believe me, I'm no friend of taxes. I think I have a pretty good record on that. But when it comes to this, these fields have a limited life. So after 10 years, we have to rehab them. And at certainly a much lesser cost, maybe half or a little bit less than that, we have to redo these fields. And then if this fund keeps growing, then maybe we do another field. We add a fifth field or whatever, plan that we do, and we really expand throughout the city. I just think there's going to be no point, certainly in my lifetime or any of ours, that we don't want to have more recreation, more athletic fields for our youth and adults to use, or expand them or make them better. So I think that we'll be in good shape as to spending the money wisely. And unlike a property tax, people know exactly where this is going. And yes, it's possible, as Mrs. Roby talked, if we put it in the general fund, we'd have to vote to get it out, but then to vote to get it all out. To do that, I think here, when we do this publicly, we establish a trust with our residents. And the money's in that fund. If we don't use it for that purpose, well, then the next election comes around and people can decide how they feel about it. But at least it's a discrete line item, and it's much easier to see what's happening there. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilor Elder?
Thank you. A couple quick follow-up questions. Actually, it's going to be towards Jeff and Chuck, because you guys probably know a little bit more. Councilor Delano was suggesting we take, 2, 3, 4 fields out at a time. In your opinion, what do you think that would do to the rotation of youth sports?
I didn't suggest anything of the kind. I'm suggesting that over a short period of time, we can do these fields, and these folks will all have to tell us what the schedule can be. And I know it may affect your business if we take fields out, but what we're talking about here is figuring out a smart way to do it.
Can I just ask, first of all, we're operating under Robert's rules. Okay, one person has the floor. Let's maintain some level of decorum. Councilor Elder?
I'm sorry I misunderstood you. I heard you say do 3 or 4 fields at once. I didn't know what that time frame was, so I apologize. I'm just looking for some type of time frame, and I was looking for their input about what we can take out, how much you think we can take out at a time. And then another question, Commissioner Lafreniere isn't here, so I don't know if you guys could answer this, but roughly how long would it take to, just say hypothetically, because I know the middle school field's one we always talk about turning into a turf field. Is that a 3-month, 6-month? I don't want you guys to speak out of turn because I don't know the answer to that if Commissioner Lafreniere was here.
It's not something I'm going to be able to answer intelligently as far as how long a park would take or how long a field. It depends on each field. Whatever field you guys decide what you're going to move, say it's Galoni or say it's, wherever the field's going to be, it all has its own particular needs and what it would be. I can't sit here and say, it'll take this amount of time. That would be something that Camp Dresser McKee would be able to get in and say, okay, this is what needs to be done to lay the field down. As far as your question regarding how it's going to impact the youth organizations like that, of course, we looked at it into saying, what is the time frame that we could take a particular field out without harming any of the youth organizations or any of the participants here in Marlborough. That's what we probably just best do. As far as we're saying multiple fields at certain times, yeah, you can't do all at once, but you can do seasonally. So if you're doing something in the spring, okay, then we're going to do something in the fall. So that field you're taking out in the spring, you're putting them somewhere else. You're putting this youth organization somewhere else. Then when the fall happens, the spring field's already done, you're switching back over. Obviously, we look for the best idea as far as what field we can take out that would minimize the impact on any youth organization or anything the recreation department's trying to do as far as field permits.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Councilor Pope?
I just wanted to follow up. I think the the disconnect there was when Councilor Delano was talking about several fields. When Councilor Delano and I had some conversations, we thought if we went out and we found a contractor that could do several fields for us, but they would do them in concession. They wouldn't do them all at the same time. And from the calls that I made to some of our neighboring communities that do have turf fields at their high schools, they did start them when school got out in June, so that they were ready to play on in late August.
Yeah.
So that's a time frame from a
usually 3
high
months
school
wait to be-
field standpoint.
Fair enough, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dominic?
I'd be remiss if I didn't talk and direct some conversation about the restaurants again, and the reasons why that they bought into the program. When we talked about this, one of the things we talked about was a dedicated fund to assure that the restaurant community, that the reason that the industry is in favor of this is because it would be a dedicated fund utilized for the specific source. Now, clearly, if the council were to go in a different direction, then the restaurant community might go in a different direction as well, because we kind of know how some of that stuff happens when it gets into the general fund and how things happen. So really important to talk about why, the restaurants are supportive of this because they see it as an economic opportunity with a dedicated fund that we know how to do it, that we've had some experience with it. When we're talking about the Economic Development Program and the Economic Development Corporation, we're talking about jobs in Marlborough. We're talking about growth to sustain a stabilized residential tax rate. We also, part of that mission is quality of life. Work, live, and play. We all know that we got 3,500 to 4,000 new jobs coming to Marlborough. We'd like some of those people to live in Marlborough, whether it be at the new overlay district in the quadrant over at the HP site, whether it be in our own communities and living and working in Marlborough. To do that, we have to continue to invest in our infrastructure and within the school system, within the Parks and Rec departments, et cetera. And that's going to create a healthier lifestyle for our community and for our kids and for the people of Marlborough. We talk about that in a passive way, but we also know that if the Parks and Rec and the school came to the city body and said, hey guys, we've got this great plan, we want to put 4 or 5 fields in, and the cost is going to be between $6 and $7.5 million, that the city council's probably not going to fund that. And there's a reason they're not going to fund it. It's a big number, and it's a hard one to swallow at one point to bond and put into the tax thing. We have an opportunity with a creative fund that can help sustain that program. The other opportunity, and I think this is critical to the community, and Trish, you and Joe, and we've talked about this is the Parks and Recreational Capital Improvement Fund. This is not something that's a 5-year or 10-year thing. God forbid, wouldn't it be something if 25 or 30 years down the road, that fund were still there, handling the needs of the community and the people of Marlborough as it relates to recreation. And we're talking about a beach program or the baseball fields or the tennis courts. In this case, in this window of time, we're talking about turf fields. But what's that look like in 7 or 8 years when those turf fields need a few $1 million to be refreshed? And then there's the tennis courts at the high school or some of these other things that need to be done. And this fund is there for the city body to choose how they want to use it. And it's not an argument on where we're going to get the money. It's the fact that the money's been set there, they've planned for it, and the forefathers 20 years ago set up a fund to do this and do it in a way that's really creative. It's an interesting part and an opportunity, I think, as we go from there. That's where I'm at.
Thank you. Councilor Delano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Has anybody talked to Camp Dresser? Is it Camp Dresser McKee?
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of a time frame on a report, and they might be able to get that back to
I would
us?
probably say it'd be a couple of weeks as far as.
Chuck and committee have had them in working on the Ward Park project, so they're kind of the, I'm going to say, the preferred vendor within Marlborough, so the people that know Marlborough the best. They've come and worked with Chuck and have walked the fields with Chuck and Jeff and have talked about some of the things. We kind of had some conversation with them. We talked to them today via email about trying to get something together that can give you a storyboard story. Yes. About that. As a rough estimate that they talk about $1.5 million per field. I think when we talk about the Watertime Victory Field, 2.3, and then Jeff, you talked about a field out in Lancaster?
The Neshoba Valley Regional High School.
And they did a field recently, you did some work on that, and what was the cost of that?
Yeah, they were in probably the 2.5 million range, but that include the new track, all the lighting, the stands, the facilities, restrooms, press box, et cetera. So it was a whole soup to nuts.
Bigger package.
But that would be very similar to what we'd like to see it.
So Joe, we've asked them to, as of Chuck's email today and my email back and forth, to get us something for the next meeting as quickly as they could. Obviously, a 7-day window is a pretty short window. They're on notice. They can probably give us something and give us some direct information as far as what's an estimated cost for the field. What's an estimated cost for a lighting proposal per field? You know, one of the things that Councilor Pope has talked a lot about is, would we really do a field and not put lighting on it? And I think it's a conversation that you all have to kind of figure out what you're doing. You know, we certainly know that passive lighting at parks is a great thing for the community. However, what's that mean? I mean, I'm not that specialist either.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think if we want to extend the day, I think that's the important thing as far as the lighting and that, I think it's, anyway, give us more opportunities for permitting the fields out, so. That'd be something, again.
Because otherwise
council
we
decide.
exclude the adults a lot. Because the kids need it, you know, then they have to go home, have dinner, and do homework.
Yeah, right.
And that's when the adults come out and play, and we adults need to play. We need to exercise.
And
Some
if-
of us more than others.
If having the conversation, and Marlborough Economic Development Corporation, now, if the corporation and Tim in his conversations with the Boston Size and company A, B, or C that are coming and talking, you know, what about the rec leagues that we have in Marlborough for the business community that are playing at 8, 9, or 10 o'clock? You know, amazingly was the story last year at Ward Park with that ice skating rink. It only worked for a couple weeks or a month and a half or so. I live at Ward Park, so I know this. But the Rockport retail store was over there 2 or 3 nights skating after they closed their store. I mean, cool thing. I'm walking my dogs at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night, and here are these guys. Who are you people? And you know, adults playing. It was great, and that's Rob. I think that Mr. Seymour. That's something that came from you, your process, your push.
With all due respect, Mr. Tomanek, you came to me with the idea and I got it done, but please don't give me credit for it. That was all you, so thank you, thank you.
Neat opportunity.
Council Pope.
I just wanted to talk about the revenue stream for a minute. Mr. Radinsky just told us that, you know, an estimate in a neighboring community was $2.5 million to do one field at one high school correctly. Can you imagine the opportunity that we have here to be able to do several fields correctly and have the ability to maintain them? Because something we're very, very good here in Marlborough is having a vision and building it. And then when it comes to maintaining it, we're not so good. We see that all over the city. We see it especially in our fields. This is a huge opportunity for us to take on a project from the beginning to the end and do it all correctly and in a timely fashion with little impact to our residents.
Thank you, Councilor. Council Pope. Excuse me. Oh, God,
Right,
I'm sorry.
I've just been upgraded.
Jeez.
I guess I'm sensing a little, some of what Councilor Elder talked about, that we're putting the cart before the horse. I would like to have a whole lot more detail of what exactly we're raising this money for, and I think we're lacking it. I'm not sure if even Park and Rec or MEDC is clear on exactly what the plan is. There's lots of people having lots of conversations, but does anybody know? Is there?
Can you give me an idea of what kind of more detail you're looking for so we can try to get that for you for the next meeting? We're talking about a revenue stream for Park and Recs for field creation and maintenance.
Which field would be first, which field would be
Well,
second?
I'm not sure that that has been decided, just as when we did MEDC, the structure of the organization hadn't been decided. I mean, I think that that is something, as Councilor Seymour had said when we started out, our purpose here this evening is to discuss whether we're going to accept the tax, and set up the home rule petition. We do need time to put those things in place, and the home rule petition itself will take us about 6 months to get through. That's why we're trying, you know, to sort of be first on the docket for the beginning of the year. But as for the numeration of the fields of who's going to be first and what, that's a little bit above my pay grade, And I say that because sitting in this room, although being a champion for this, I am probably the least athletic person in the room, which makes it a little bit ironic that I think that this is such a cool thing. My sons are really giggling about it. But I think that that is a decision that there's going to be some thoughtful conversation. Have had a conversation with the mayor, and I know that there's going to be some thoughtful conversation between Mr. Radinsky and Mr. Thibodeau and Mr. Matthews and that whole group that will bring a proposal forward, so to the mayor. But they